Hello, I'm Steven Roy Goodman, host of Higher Education Today, a production of the University of the District of Columbia. Welcome back to the education program that connects you to contemporary issues, people, and institutions involved in the world of higher education. Today we'll be talking about architecture on campus. Francis Halsband is a partner at Kliment Halsband Architects, a firm that assists universities with campus design and planning. Francis served as a dean of the Pratt Institute School of Architecture and as a commissioner of the New York City Landmarks Preservation Commission. Thomas DelGiudice is an associate professor of economics and former director of capital planning at the State University of New York College at Old Westbury. Tom helped to coordinate the program study of Old Westbury's new academic building. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Well, thanks for coming down. Francis, maybe if we could start with you. You advise a number of campuses about buildings. Is there something that connects that in some way? Do all schools want one thing, or do different schools want different things?
Thank goodness all schools want different things. I think as schools begin to think about their buildings, they're really reflecting their own set of values about what they want for things. Some schools will want all of their buildings to be different to reflect a kind of diversity of attitude. Other schools will say, no, we have a campus style and this is the way we do things.
And what's the campus style at Old Westbury? Could you say, Tom, that there's a unique campus style at Old Westbury?
There was a somewhat dysfunctional style there for a number of years in terms of the architecture, and that as the college grew, we had to change that. And so SUNY Old Westbury is a very diverse campus. It's located right outside New York City in Nassau County. Sits on 600 acres of beautiful real estate, the biggest open space in Nassau County. And really weren't taking advantage of the natural beauty of the campus. So one of the things that, with situating this new building, one of the important things was to figure out a way to make that beauty come and be something that is integrated in the student experience.
Which is interesting, but my understanding is you're not an architecture. You're an architect. You are an economics professor.
Right.
How did you get involved in this?
So I served on the capital planning committee as the faculty member on the capital planning committee. And we had struggled for a number of years. New York State was having a tough time fiscally, so it came to be that we were going to get some money and that we were going to be able to renovate our campus. And the president went to me, he said, Tom, are you interested in leading the charge on this? And at first I was a little worried, but I actually thought it was a good opportunity. I really know the campus. I felt the faculty respect me, the students respect me. So I thought maybe this is a good position for me to be the intersection of all these different needs and help in the planning of this.
And you both work together.
Right.
And Francis, what was it like to work with Tom, aside being that he was a wonderful guy and that you enjoyed it, but what was it like to work with Tom, and specifically, what did Old Westbury want or need that was different from other schools?
Let's see, first question first. It was wonderful to work with Tom because he used the word intersection, and I think he really understood all the different constituencies that had to be brought together. So he made our job easier, because normally we're trying to bring all of those different groups together. Our first task, in fact, was to talk to all of those groups and find out what they wanted and what they thought they needed. And we were listening both for square footage, I want this many offices and so on, but we were also listening for the campus texture and the quality of what people thought was important and what was the character that they wanted to convey to their students.
Well, what does that mean exactly, the character that they want to convey?
I think we're looking for the things that made Old Westbury special, the things that they felt were unique about their particular way of teaching or their way of engaging students, that we could bring that into the building that we designed.
So that would be different from school to school.
Oh, that's the fun of my job, is that it's always different from school to school. That's exactly right.
So you might design a building to be friendly, or you might design a building to kind of be imposing, or you might design a building to shock and awe.
I might, but chances are I wouldn't. Now, I think we would be listening, for instance, to whether a campus felt it was important to engage the students and create community spaces for students, or some campuses are really just thinking about how to make life better for the guys that run the snowplows. That would be a whole different approach. I don't know if we would go along with that, but we're listening for those kinds of things. Or one particular group might, a department might say, we really want to have a department seminar room that we can decorate in our own way and have our own books and have books there written by our professors so that students coming into that space will understand who we are as a department. That would become a design feature as we moved forward.
And so let's play this out. This is interesting. So who decides what they want? I assume Professor Jones or Professor Smith have different interests.
Well, that's where the intersection comes along. If you're working in a committee, and I have to say, if you're working in a committee at a university, everybody is trying to do the best possible thing they can, and they have a common objective, which is to make the best possible environment for students and faculty. And so eventually, in a committee, a consensus can be reached, which is why it's more fun than in the rest of the world, where often consensus is not that easy.
But do students have anything to say in this?
Yep. We interviewed, as part of the program study, we interviewed every single department. We did a number of interviews with students. We did focus groups with students. We're looking for what kinds of spaces they want, what kind of study spaces they want, what's bad about the classrooms they have now, what do they think they would like to have in the classrooms, how accessible are the teachers going to be, which is a very important part when you talk about texture. SUNY Old Westbury wants to have a very personal experience. You know, it's interesting in this cyber world, where everybody's talking about going online. We want the experience on the campus to be very social. We want our students interacting with each other. We want the teachers interacting with each other and the students. So that was all part of the story that came out of program study, and the students were very much involved in all of that experience.
So you would, let's say, design a walkway or design a hallway of this new academic building to encourage more people to bump into each other.
Exactly.
Exactly, yeah. And in fact, the building that we designed is a very long building, and at every intersection where there's a stair, there's always a student lounge at that place. So students coming in see students going by, and they all meet at those places. That was an absolutely essential thing.
Yeah, can I add to that?
Please.
Especially on the corridor, it is a long building. I remember reading something a little later about Bell Laboratories, how they designed this long corridors so that the scientists would have to walk past each other and interact with each other. And now that the building's been open for a year, we're actually seeing that. We have one long corridor, but it's not a straight corridor where you can see all the way down it. That would be too institutional. What the architects did is they created these angles. And at every angle, there's a student-like lounge where they can sit and study, really pretty with big glass windows so you can see the beautiful campus. And so what happens is this, the students have that corridor and they're back and forth and they're studying, but they also have other corridors that go to the other side of the building where all the faculty are. So it's very easy to get to the faculty. The faculty are always walking by each other, interacting with each other. Very different than our old building where they were in like towers and they were very isolated, very hard to get to, and very difficult to intersect with anybody from another department.
But I imagine, let's say a professor doesn't want to interact with students, then they would not like your building. Is that right?
That's true. But you know what happens? It grows on them. This is the interesting thing. There are people that, you know, I remember when we were picking out offices, I had to help allocate the offices. Oh, I want the most private office. I want it all the way at the end, you know. But what you find out is we're meeting each other. Now we share some mail rooms. We share some spaces or services, right? And you find yourself interacting with these faculty that wouldn't ordinarily be the person that you thought you'd be interacting, and sharing knowledge. Just the other day, I was interacting with a faculty member that, you know, I've known for a long time, but we have a good conversation about hybrid courses. And she's been doing these hybrid courses for a while. She was able to give me some good tips on that. You know, I have another faculty member that I'm working with, and also we're starting up an idea on paper on inequality. So this is really happening. This kind of cross-fertilization is really happening. So people are surprised that you grow into it. So space really shapes the consciousness as opposed to the other way around.
But what about some of the older campuses? I mean, we have a number of old campuses in the United States where we don't have space for a brand new building. Or maybe we fix up a building. How do you deal with that if that's the case?
Yeah. Actually, I think campuses are buildings, but they're really open spaces. And in fact, many students will never get into all of the buildings on a campus. So I think where you place a building and how you create a space that's a gathering space is even more important than the buildings themselves. I mean, a new building is only new for a couple of years and then it's just part of the scenery. But creating a big open space where people can gather is there forever.
And so what's the commonality? Do I feel the commonality of a building or the commonality of a space?
Oh, you feel the commonality of a space. The space, there are no cars on campuses, at least there shouldn't be. So as you're walking around, you're free to look at other students or look at the trees or just have your own private thoughts, and you're not worrying about dodging a car, getting run over. That single thing probably is the most important distinguishing characteristic of a campus that makes it different from being out on the street in a city.
Let me follow up on that. At the old academic building, the parking lot was very close to the building. People could just roll out of their car and go into the academic building, go back to their car. So what we have, commuter students and resident students. Commuter students would sit in their cars a lot. So we've got to get these commuter students, especially if you're trying to create an integrated. We have this diverse campus. We want social justice as part of our mission. We want to get these students working together. So now in the new setup, the parking lots are not that close to the building, but the building has all these inviting spaces where you can stay and plug in and work on your laptop or wireless device and work with other students, you know. So it really has changed the culture. You actually see the students integrating in the spaces. And partly that's because the parking lot's a little bit away now, you know. They can complain about that a little bit, but they enjoy being in the space. Yeah, positive feedback all across.
Well, but that does raise the issue as to who are we serving? Are we serving the commuter student or are we serving the residential student? And I imagine, actually, let me throw it to both of you. Is that a different type of building that you're going to design based on who you're serving?
I think what you're trying to do is bring both together. You really want commuter students to feel that there's a place where they can be at home on the campus. And we've designed special commuter student lounges, but even more important, there should be a place where they can leave their books for a little while, where they can have a cup of coffee with other people. So you're trying to break down those barriers that separate students from other students, as well as students from faculty.
And there are always trade-offs, you know. The bottom line is the mission of whatever the mission of the college is, that's why you came to our college, right? And you're going to have to make some adjustments, right? And so for me, it's always about a little bit of trade-offs, but for a positive, overall positive experience. And that takes, you know, it takes a couple of years. You're going to be at this campus, you're going to grow into it, you're going to learn from this, it's going to shape you. And so that's okay if there's a little tension sometimes for one or the other. You can't have everything.
Well, fair enough. If you don't mind me asking a question that may be a taboo topic, the issue of social class on campus is one that I've explored quite a bit over the years, and a lot of people don't like to talk about it because it's kind of the big elephant in the room. But would we design a campus for quote-unquote working class students in a different way than we would design Harvard or Brown or Stanford?
I'll throw that to Francis first.
I don't think we would. I think you might spend a little more money on the buildings in one place or another, but I think in a way campuses are ideal communities. They're what we all envision we would like the rest of our lives to be like. They're places that everybody wants to be there. They're there for a single purpose. They're there to respect each other and learn to respect each other. So you're trying to create what you think of as the perfect place to live. With any luck, students and faculty would take that with them when they go back out into the real world. But you really are trying to erase differences rather than creating differences.
For our campuses, it's pretty much a working class campus, but it's ethnically diverse. It's like 33% black, 20% Hispanic, 9% Asian, and the rest white. And so what we're trying to do is get that mix going. And that's a little taboo to talk about too. So we have this great diversity, but how do we get them interacting? So when you place a building in a certain spot on the campus, and everybody has to walk through this atrium and the clubs are holding events, and they can start to see those events and it starts to seep into their consciousness that maybe I'd like to be involved in something like this. So we didn't have that before, and now we have that. We have these central spaces where everybody gets to, you know, get excited about some opportunity for them. And that's working.
Well, and what about the issue of cost, right? I mean, a lot of students, you know, are spending a lot of money to go to campus, to school, right? And a lot of students and parents complain that tuitions keep going up and up and up. And so wouldn't there be a tension between a campus committee like yours that says, you know, we want to keep tuition down versus a committee that says, you know, let's build a brand new, beautiful building that's going to attract future students?
And then, go ahead, you want to start?
I think that comes up in building committees, because once a committee really gets fired up about a particular project, then everyone wants to spend more on it. And then the pushback is, well, but if we spend this $1 million here, it won't go into student aid. And so it's really up to the people running the place. It's really up to the president ultimately to say, this is how we're going to allocate our resources. We're going to spend this much on building and no more, because we want to save the rest for student aid or for other things, or faculty salaries or other things that we understand are important. So you can read that when you visit a campus. You can sense what are their priorities, where are they putting their money, what's important to them. So.
In New York, we have a construction fund, State University Construction Fund, and we're only going to be allocated so much money for our capital dollars, and so we have to make the best use of them. So there will always be trade-offs. So it'll be more of an issue: should we build the building? Should we renovate a building? Should we build walkways? Should we make the parking lot bigger? So it's more of an issue about how we trade off. It doesn't affect tuition necessarily. It's more about, you got a fixed amount of capital dollars, how are you going to allocate those dollars?
What about at a private school, though? Where if there's no state university fund that the university is drawing from, how would that work?
Well, apparently private schools have budgets too, as far as we can determine, and the trustees and the president will set those same kinds of rules. It's interesting because in a private school, you'll sometimes get a donor who wants to spend more on a particular project or a particular building, maybe even wants a trophy building with his or her name on it, and then it's up to the administration to push back and say, well, but no, we only want to spend this much here because we're trying to raise money for scholarships. Not easy, but can be done.
Well, that does raise an interesting question. I wonder if ever there's somebody comes to you and says, we want to design what you called a trophy building, but it doesn't necessarily fit into the rest of campus. Does that happen?
They don't come to us. We're hired after that decision is made, luckily, I think. But that's a tough decision. I couldn't go there.
But that must happen, I assume.
Yeah, well, actually, another way of framing that is saying that some campuses will hope to have a trophy building to attract more students. And I don't know if anyone's done a study on whether that works or not. I think maybe it doesn't work because in a few years it's not a new building anymore, and then what? So.
Fair enough. In terms of people coming to visit campus, a number of campuses spend a lot of money designing who's going to take a tour, who's going to lead the tours for parents and kids when they visit the school. And there are a number of universities that have done extensive studies about this. Like, we're going to show you this part of this building and not this part of this building, this part of this dorm, but not that part of that dorm. How do you take that into account when you're designing or fixing up buildings?
Actually, I think it's about the front door. When I first started working at Brown about 12 years ago, I drove up from New York. It was a 3-hour drive. I pulled up in front of the admissions office because I thought that would be the friendliest place. And there was a flight of steps way up to the top of this thing. I jumped out of my car, ran up the steps, said to the woman at the desk, "Hi, I'm coming for a visit. Where can I park?" And she smiled and she said to me, "We don't have visitor parking." That's changed now. They have a new place. They have visitor parking now, and they don't have that flight of steps. So I think that very first impression is absolutely, absolutely critical. I think students get that instantly. As soon as they get out of the car, they can say, "Yeah, I want to be here," or "No, I don't." And I've interviewed them to try and understand what that is. Some of them can't even explain it, but it's absolutely, absolutely there. You know in the first minute whether it's a place for you.
So some building or set of buildings can welcome one student, but tell another student, "I'm not interested."
Exactly right, yeah. Or a place. When I interviewed the students at Brown, they were very clear that they didn't want to be out in the countryside, but they were a little bit afraid to be in big cities. Well, Brown is a small campus in a small city. That felt just right to them. On the other hand, when I was taking my son around to look at schools, we drove to Princeton one day. He got out of the car, looked around, said, "Not enough sidewalks, take me home." That was it.
Well, a building like the one that you guys worked on together at SUNY Old Westbury, would that fit on a city campus?
Oh.
If it had the space. One of the things that happened is a couple of things got married together. We were looking for a campus center. A core of the campus where everybody would meet and activities could occur. And so we created our building. We had a certain location that worked for that. And it was a long location, and we ended up with a long building, and we adjusted that space to meet the needs and the mission of our college, you know. If you're in Manhattan, you're not going to have that kind of real estate. You're going up, you're not going along. And so you really, one of the impressive things right from the beginning, working with the architects, is how they could make a space and turn it into a functional, make the location turn into a functional building that fit the needs, you know, and it was fun to play around with that
Also,
end of it.
I think the building has two very different sides. There's a classroom side facing back into the campus, and then there's a side of faculty offices that are facing out into the woods. That was a very conscious effort to make more of the center of the campus and then let the rest go as something else. That's you rarely get that opportunity in the city, I think.
And did you present these ideas to the committee and say, I've got 3 main concepts that, and then you chose, or who makes the final decision? I assume the college.
Right, so we did all these interviews, it all bubbled up. We came up with 4 or 5 proposals for locations. We actually voted, I think, on those locations.
Right,
And so this location and this style building was the one that everyone agreed on. And it was back and forth a little bit, but I think it was a little bit low-hanging fruit that this was a good idea, this is what we're going to do. So yeah, we voted on it. We had an advisory committee and we had an executive committee. If an advisory committee couldn't have agreed on it, the executive committee probably would have to make the say.
And so let's say Frances presented these ideas to the committee. And hypothetically, in reality. And you wanted something to be changed. So then how would you communicate that? You'd say, well, I like most of the idea, but this is what I'd like to tweak?
Yeah, I guess that's pretty much how it would work. That's pretty much how it would work. Trying to think about the specifics of that. That was a long time ago. I think what happens too is there's this level where you're at a high altitude and you're working your way down. You know, so there'll be a big discussion. Right? What's the future of the campus? You know, over the next 10 years or 20 years, what do we want this to look like? How's this building going to be integrated into it? You know, and if you've done your homework and you've really worked on it, you know, most of the participants in the committee are going to see that, and there's not going to be that much of an argument because you've done the work, you've done the homework, you've tied it into the mission, you can get probably a majority of that committee, and probably you'll get a consensus in the end. You know, and I think that's how it went down here.
But what if there's a senior administrator who's not involved in the committee and they're doing something else, and then all of a sudden they come in at the 11th hour and say, I don't like the color, or I don't like too much brick, not enough brick.
People do that.
What happens then?
You see, but a successful process is where people don't come in at the 11th hour.
Right.
A successful process is where you've done the homework, where you've talked to everybody in the beginning and really understand what they're trying to accomplish. An unsuccessful process is we're off in the corner making pictures. We show the pictures to someone and they say, no, I was thinking blue, you gave me pink. So it doesn't really work when you don't have a group that I'm saying everything backwards. It works when you have a group working together from the beginning to the end.
Yeah, and we are meeting regularly, so nothing's catching anybody by surprise.
Yeah.
And there is a lot of behind-the-scenes conversation. So I would take note of somebody's concerns, and I would make sure I had a meeting with them, and we'd really talk through the details of those concerns. And usually we can work things out.
Well, fair enough. We've only got a few minutes left, but let's say a student was interested in learning how to do this. Would they take courses? What do you recommend that a student who might be interested in having your career or even having your career might do to prepare for something like this?
Actually, there are a bunch of summer school courses that are offered to students who are thinking of becoming architects. Those are all terrific and well worth having. They're in many schools, students are members of the committees that are working on these projects. It's another great place for a student to just be present and see how the dialogue goes and see what the issues are that involved. So those are 2 things I would strongly recommend.
We don't have an architect major, but if we did, and we had interns coming in, sitting in on those program meetings would have been great experience for them, seeing how Frances helped work the room and have those kinds of discussions. But also sitting in on the construction meetings would be kind of interesting too. It was a real eye-opener for me because in some ways I was like a student on some elements of it, you know. And it was very enjoyable, but you can't learn that in a classroom. You have to be in the construction trailer and see the kinds of problems that come up and how you fix them and how you work through them. You know?
But these are very sensitive issues, because so somebody's going to raise the issue of we don't want to spend this money, or we do want to spend this money, or we want to move the university in this direction, or we don't want to move it in that direction. How can we get more students involved in such a sensitive discussion?
Ooh.
Well, you have, you know, at the time when we were doing this building, we have middle states review, we have strategic planning. So this is not happening in a vacuum. We already have all these things that are looking out, you know, and we're having conversations with students around that. We're having conversations with all the departments, the School of Education, the School of Business. And so then this building is becoming integrated into that. And that was the beautiful thing for us, is that all these planning processes were occurring at almost the exact same time. So it really got integrated. And so it kind of had a momentum, and it went on its own.
Well, fair enough. Any last bit of advice for campuses or professors thinking about getting involved in something like this?
If a professor has a proclivity to be interested in the facilities area, I think it's a great idea to have a professor play an important role in any kind of program and study and working with their colleagues. I think that would be a great. I don't know how often it happens. Maybe it's rare, but I think it really worked well in our case.
And I would say it's not just a lesson in architecture, it's a lesson in civics, that at any time you can get a big group of people with diverse opinions together and agreeing to talk and arrive at a common goal, that's a good thing.
And to follow up on that common goal, but you've worked at so many different campuses. How do you do that?
You just keep talking to people. I think the more transparent the process is, the more people want to be a part of it, feel they've been heard, and understand why, even though their own point of view may not be what prevails, they understand how the process worked and how their point of view was a part of that in the end.
And there may be a moment where their point of view will be incorporated, just maybe 5 years down the line or 3 years down the line. It just may not be today, you know? I mean, in other words, campuses are ongoing and evolving, right? So there's going to be this long view too, and they're going to be part of that. You know?
Well, thank you both for your important work in the field and for helping to advance the building of campuses and architecture on campus.
Thank you.
If you would like additional information about Francis Halsband or Tom DelGiudice, please visit climenthalsband.com or oldwestbury.edu. If you have comments or suggestions about higher education today, please send an email to our viewer mailbox at highereducationtoday@topcolleges.com. Thank you for watching. We will continue to bring you quality discussions about important matters in today's college and university world. Please join me again for another edition of Higher Education Today. I'm Steven Roy Goodman, and you've been watching Higher Education Today.